See you tight. I agree. See my seat. I apologize.
No, we'll be in person. We only did virtual because of the weather, adverse weather that could have been coming in. Yeah, it's kind of a mixture.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yep. So good morning, everybody. We'll be getting started in 1 minute. 1 minute. Deputy Secretary.
Morning. How are you?
How are you?
Working in here?
Yeah, we can. Yes, sir. Want to sit on this side or?
Good, Matt.
Okay, I can slide down the chair. Yeah, I'll see, sir. Rock and roll, whatever. Yeah, we are.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining the Task Force for Safer Schools. It's good to see everybody. Thank you for being flexible with us. We decided we would go ahead and change this to a virtual meeting today because of the impending weather, and we know we have members that are joining us from all across the state of North Carolina that we didn't want to force you to travel in flooding conditions. So we appreciate everybody being flexible with us and moving to a virtual meeting today. We've got a lot on the agenda today, so I'll be quick with my introductions. But we want to thank all the members for joining us today and being part of the discussion. As part of the task force today, we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's going on with school threats, and we got some data on that. We've got Karen's going to give us an update from our executive director from the Center for Safer Schools is going to give us an update on things that they're doing in the most recent conference they just had down in Wilmington. So looking forward to that. We've got Scott from DHHS that's here today. That's going to give us some information about the things that are going on with violent deaths across the state of North Carolina and some of the efforts that DHHS is putting together to approach that. And we've got Sierra Scott, the executive director of the Office of Violence Prevention, that's also here today. So like I said, we've got a full agenda. Really excited about all the topics that are going to be covered today. Before we get to that, I just want to give everybody a quick overview of some things that are upcoming with NC Safe. As you know, that we've presented about NC Safe at the last couple of meetings and kind of given everybody an update. For those of you that aren't familiar or can't remember, NC Safe stands for Secure All Firearms Effectively. We've been working on a public awareness campaign across the state of North Carolina to get to people to make sure they understand the importance of safe storage of firearms. I'm happy to announce that we just got a federal grant to extend that work into the school systems across the state of North Carolina, so that we can work with school districts across the state to really talk about this issue of safe storage. And mainly the target audience there is going to be parents, making sure that parents understand the importance of safe storage of firearms. And the reason for that, while we're going after schools to be part of that conversation, is because we know last year in the state of North Carolina, we had at least 86 guns that came onto school campuses that were found, and where juveniles were had juvenile complaints that were filed against them for those guns coming on school campuses. And we know that that terrorizes the full school campus. It terrorizes the families, it terrorizes the kids and the teachers. And so we want to make sure that parents understand the importance of not allowing their kids to have access to those firearms in their local communities, and so that they don't bring those to school that are not supervised. So excited to announce that we got funding from the SCIP funding, which is the federal funds that were allotted by Congress a couple of years ago when that regulations and new law passed in Congress. And so excited about that work and what we're going to be able to do with that. And so with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Emmett, who is with Juvenile Justice in the North Carolina Department of Public Safety. He is a researcher for us and a statistician, and he's going to give us an update on some of the most recent school threat information from the last school year. So Emmett, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Emmett Williams. I'm a statistician, as Mr. Lasker said, here for Juvenile Justice. This is an honor to be here. I'm a former educator myself, so being able to come and present just a small amount of the research data that we collect here, specifically how it relates to North Carolina school system, I think that is a very particular angle that we can accommodate from our data in trying to deal with the particular difficulties that a lot of our students face. The interaction of the school system and our juvenile justice data is a very interesting world to get into. I spent a few years as a math instructor in the community college system before being introduced to the juvenile justice population of high school students, which among the educator world is a very little known group of students. So that really became my focus. And I transitioned over to teaching math full-time in the facilities for about 3 years before making my way up to Raleigh as a statistician. So anything school threat related or school-based offense related is particular interest to me. So we put together just a short couple of slides this morning to represent what a school threat is. It's not a legal term. It's a collection of charged offenses that we put together on our end. But we won't spend too much time this morning. We just have a couple of slides. Let me see if I can go ahead and share them. And we will try to give you a good snapshot of what the school threat environment looks like from our perspective on the data end. Okay, is everyone able to see that now?
Yeah, we got it, sir.
Okay, so for a school threat for us, when it comes in through our data, what we are interested in is we're taking all of the complaints and anything that occurs school-based, bus stop, the actual school property itself, anything related to school personnel, these all become flagged as school-based offenses for us. So we can clearly delineate when we want to analyze anything to do with our education department. So these complaints come in and we have a charged offense attached to each one of them. And for us, we've collected 3 that we group together kind of in the umbrella term of a school threat. So for fiscal year 24, this past school year, communicating threats was 62% of what we call a school threat. This is very indicative of previous years. We're going to look at a couple of years back to see how COVID influenced our data, but you're going to see some consistencies as we move through that. Our second largest contributor to our school threat data is at 31% for this past year, and that's communicating the threat of mass violence. And then the false reporting of the same kind of comes in, carries about 10% on average throughout the years. We are looking at a subgroup of our school-based offenses. So of all school-based offenses for this past year, the group that we're talking about this morning, the school threats, these accounted for about 9 to 10% historically, and last year it was 9% on the nose. Okay, so this is a significant group, but it is a subpopulation of the broader school-based offenses. Just for an example, these 3 charged offenses here go together to form the school threat for us, but altogether last year we had 236 different charged offenses. So this is a small sample of the offenses that are occurring on campus, but we wanted to just give a snapshot this morning of school threat specifically and what that means to us and how it looks in our data. Okay. So if we zoom out a little bit and look at this by month, you can see that this type of data is what we would call very seasonal. That just means it's easy to predict. Now, it's easy to predict things that are kind of zoomed out a level. I can say every July and August, we're going to have a minimum number of school threats. These things match up logically, right? School in the summertime is less, so obviously our complaints that we're going to be having there are less as well. It does give you a little bit of insight looking at seasonal data visually. We can see the winter break. Also, we have another minimum, and then it lets us know that towards the end of each semester, the middle, things are kind of getting to a boiling point, and we're experiencing a lot more school threats as each semester comes to a close. The biggest takeaway visually from seasonal data like this is our range that we should be expecting our next set of data to fall into. We can see fiscal year 23 was slightly elevated, and that has a lot to do with the COVID rebound from a lot of our school-based offense data. We'll see that on our next and our last little slide here. We'll back up a couple of years and let you see that impact. But for the most part, we're looking at 120s and our mid 20s for a minimum. And so we can think of these as our upper bound and our lower bound. And this should be what we expect to see for fiscal year 25 when that data comes in. But altogether, very minimal increases, nothing that we would attribute to anything other than just population. Now, if we step back even further, time-wise and kind of granularity-wise, if we just look at all school threats, this is our green line that we have indicating here, and then the distinct juveniles. So oftentimes a juvenile will present with multiple, what we would call school threats. Maybe he communicated 2 threats or he communicated threats multiple times. Okay, these things will appear differently in our data, but overall, over this entire period, we remain steady at each juvenile typically receiving 1.2 school threats. When they receive a complaint with a school threat, typically it's 1.2. Let me say that backwards. If we look at what was happening before COVID, school threats in particular were trending downward. Okay, the distinct juveniles that were committing the school threats and the school threats themselves were heading in a good direction. Everything school-based is going to bottom out in that fiscal year 21 data for us. No school, not many school-based offenses occurring. The majority of that is accountable to incidents happening on school campus during the summer, that sort of thing. This is what was happening in that fiscal year 22, kind of a false bottom for us. We rebounded from that significantly. Okay? We increased our number of complaints in the school threat category by over 4 times for that next fiscal year. And then we kind of tapered off a little bit with a modest, it was a 13% increase from fiscal year 22 to 23. The nice and important thing to recognize about this is if we back up and kind of analyze and look at the impact that COVID had and then the impact of the rebound of going away from school and then coming back to school, we seem to be getting back on a good path. We're trending negative in both the number of school complaints that we received and in the distinct juveniles committing those complaints, and we are getting close to our pre-COVID numbers. So the school threat data was a good opportunity to present how COVID impacted some of the school-based data that we collect and some of the things that we can collect from the school-based information that we get. And it was a good opportunity to have a positive note of this is a category that experienced a large rebound, a very large rebound when we're coming out of fiscal year 21, but we seem to be back to a stabilizing pattern, almost back to our pre-COVID days, which were also starting to recede. Okay. So that's really just the snapshot that we wanted to present this morning. Really just to give you kind of a more detailed idea of what a school threat is from our perspective, how that looks in our data, and then what's been happening with that data over the last couple of years. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Secretary Laster and Jared.
Thank you, Emmett. We appreciate that presentation, and we wanted to present this data to you because I know over the last couple of years, the General Assembly has done several pieces of legislation really focused on threats and threat assessments. And I know Karen's going to talk about the threat assessment teams and the training that they're doing with those staff across the state of North Carolina. So we wanted to kind of give you a picture of what that data was looking like. I know last year at this time, we presented to the task force and showed you guys that uptick that Emmett was showing in the last year. But the good news is that we have seen progress. And so appreciate Emmett presenting that data. I'll open the floor real quick to if there are any questions. And I don't know if Jared can help me if anybody put something in the chat, but if there are any questions that you want to come off mute and ask those real quick, we have time for about 2 or 3 quick questions before we move on to Karen. Okay. All right, you must have done a good job in it. Good job. So we appreciate your presentation, and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Fairley, who is the Executive Director for Safer Schools, and she's going to give us our presentation on an update about what the center has been up to. Thanks, Karen. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, just give me 1 second so I can make sure that I'm doing this right. So what do you see? Do you see my slide?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, good, great. So definitely, the center has taken on a new growth, and we have divided ourselves in sections, if you will, because of the growth. And so I'll talk about each section and what we're doing in those sections. I know there's also an inquiry as it relates to the EOPs for charter schools, and I'll talk about that along as I go with my presentation. So we have the legislation for the SARA and the shrimp, and we're working with emergency management as it relates to that. For those who don't know, when the legislation was originally created, the Center for Safer Schools was in emergency management. And so now that we are over in DPI, we are still working with emergency management to get schools into the school risk management plan application, and to make sure that their schematics are updated in that. So prior, when the original legislation was written, it was the districts, the 115 districts. With House Bill 605 in 2023 session, it included each public school unit. So that included the charters as well. And so now the charters are required to provide law enforcement with their schematic drawings and to include their schematic diagrams and interest into their buildings. And then once and this applies to all public school units to include charter, once they have made any substantial modifications, they are required to notify emergency management and their local law enforcement, and making sure that local law enforcement has access, updated access to any of their buildings, whether it's the lock, the Knox box, whatever it is, they need to have access. And that House Bill 605 made it that it's all public school units, and that changed it from the districts to include the charters. And then the center, in consultation with DPS, will develop standards and guidelines. And so we have already started that process. My team is already working with emergency management, and we're getting that underway. We're hoping to be finished with the guidelines this school year. However, schools are not required, but they may use these standards and guidelines. And I have highlighted in red the areas that I'm discussing more, and definitely you can read the legislation in its entirety at your convenience. And so again, House Bill 605 in this section, any schematics, and the school risk management plan. The school risk management plan, we are looking at that to make sure that it is comprehensive. We are working with districts to ensure that it is comprehensive. And we are also going to work with the charters as well to utilize this, to make sure they're utilizing the SARA and the shrimp, but also to make sure that they have quality plans. So in order to help with that effort, the center, using the DPI division of the state, has hired 7 of the 8 school safety specialists. We are still lacking one in the Northwest, but I do have a temporary person who is filling that gap until we find a permanent replacement. So each of these school safety specialists will be working and living in their region, and their job is to support those safety directors in ensuring that they have uploaded their schematics, their school risk management plans, and that they have quality plans. This includes the charters as well. The center is still doing the educating kids on guns and gangs. Our 7 plus the temporary, the 8 school safety specialists have been trained. They are going to train in their regions. They're going to train the SROs in the regions so that SROs can facilitate it. The center's position is that we want to utilize the SROs in the best possible light, more of a mentoring. And so this is an ideal for them to get in front of their classroom, 7th grade, and interact with them on something that is important. And so they will understand the possible legal, medical, and emotional consequences of youth gun possession. We have the movie that we're showing with that, and this is a EKG2 in the 7th grade, is a 2-day event. We did it last year as a pilot. This year, because we do have the school safety specialists, we are going to continue to do it. We're going to host those in the various schools. We're going to host the training of the SROs and then allow them to do it in their individual schools. As you know, we have a training center. Right now, we're temporarily using the facility in Moore County on Samarkand. However, a couple of years ago, the legislators gave DPS the money to purchase a old East Montgomery High School on behalf of the center, and to upfit it and maintain it on behalf of the center. So it is the Center for Safer Schools training facility, and it is utilized to give school units the reality of what would happen in an actual school. So we're trying to keep the integrity of the school, keeping the classrooms, the library, the cafeteria. It'll be a non-working cafeteria, but it'll be a cafeteria nonetheless, so that we are able to give the trainees the most realistic scenario possible. And based on the funding, we're hoping to receive the majority of the funding needs to finish the renovation in this next long session. The second division of the Center for Safer Schools now is behavioral health. Dr. Stephanie Ellis, who was a task force member, but she now heads this section at the center based on House Bill 605 again. Threat assessment teams needed to be established beginning this school year. And the Center for Safer Schools was to develop the guidance by collecting information from existing schools. We did that with my multidisciplinary team that was created year before last. We worked with various agencies and disciplines, local law enforcement, EMS, local and state. We worked with teachers, retired teachers. We worked with everybody we could that were already doing this work. And we came up with a guidance. That guidance was published, I believe, in March. It is on our website, and it is for the creation and implementation, maintaining a threat assessment teams in your schools and districts. Also, a requirement was for us to give guidance as it relates to a peer-to-peer support program. That peer-to-peer programming has been completed. We're waiting for legal to give their John Hancock, and we will move forward. One of the things that the center is doing to do that is the teen mental health first aid. We think that that is definitely a great peer-to-peer support program. And so this is just, again, the guidance that we already gave. This was a training that Dr. Ellis did as it relates to what that guidance looks like and how that guidance would be implemented. I have under here mental health first aid. The center, I'm requiring that all of my program staff be trained in 2 of the mental health first aids. And so with the highlight of the teen mental health first aid, if you realized I just said on the previous slide that we are using that to support the peer-to-peer because we think that teen mental health first aid is definitely a way to help teens reach out to other teens. We have some guidelines as it relates to that, because what we don't want is youth feeling overwhelmed because they're trying to do something that is beyond their capability. So definitely we have a process and hoping that schools and districts adhere to it, public schools units adhere to it so that the children won't feel overwhelmed in doing this. This is just some of the staff that was trained in mental health first aid youth. And so they are going to, some of them are our regional safety specialists. And so they'll be training in their regions school staff on youth mental health first aid so that we can identify signs and symptoms of what could be a danger to a child's self or others. And so Dr. Ellis is over this as well because we're utilizing it in conjunction with the behavioral threat assessment. It's a holistic approach. It's not one or the other. We're looking at everything in totality. Last legislative year, House Bill 142, legislation 128 came out, and it was to modify penalties and definitions for certain sex offenses against students. One of the things that the legislation charged the center with is producing videos that are age appropriate about what grooming looks like. And also this House bill legislation increase the penalty for failures of school administrators to report certain misconduct. And so our superintendent, Catherine Truitt, was instrumental in helping this legislation go through and volunteering us, the center, to create these videos. And so they were launched at our this past RISE Back to School Safety Summit that we did in Wilmington. There is a middle school video, there is a high school video, and then there is a video for all staff. And all these videos should be shown within 5 days of school starting. The videos are ready. We're waiting just for legal again to sign off on the guide that goes with it. There's a guide that we put with it so that when it's for the middle and high school, the teacher or whoever is presenting it, and we're asking that also a mental health professional be included in that room when it's shown, can have questions to address with the children to have an engaging conversation. The center has also been assigned the oversight of alternative learning programs. And so our job going forward is to establish the process for an alternative learning program, provide technical assistance, and then the monitoring and evaluation. We will focus on that and discipline. And we are developing, as we speak, a statewide discipline matrix model. It is not a requirement that it is used. It is just a guide to help districts to be consistent and objective in the discipline aspect. The next division for the center is programs. I felt that it was necessary for us to engage with students because they know way more than we as it relates to their school climate. And so we got federal funding to do a student engagement piece. We have a student engagement team that works with schools, and we identify each year 2 cohorts, one from the East and one from the West, a group of students. This is definitely in the pilot stage, but we work with them in creating a positive school climate. We work with them in building up leadership so that we can understand what's really going on in the schools and what they need. And what their concerns are. So I do these school tours, and when I'm doing the school tours, one of the things I ask is that I meet with an administrator, the safety person, but a group of students so that we can get an actuality of what's going on in their particular districts. And so it's Shine and Seed. The Shine is for the middle school. It's middle school appropriate. And that's one of the pictures of the children. And then the Seed is for the high schoolers. Also, we are, because we have the student engagement section, they are working diligently with the Save Promise clubs. That's a youth leadership initiative of Sandy Hook Promise. The difference in this and the other 2 Shine and Seeds is that a lot of times these children in the Safe Promise clubs are already children who are going to make a difference or who are in student government or whatever. And the other 2, Shine and Seed, tends to focus on the children who have some challenges. They're not ready. They have not entered into the juvenile justice arena, but we see that might be the case. So we utilize the anonymous reporting system in all aspects of what the center does. Sandy Hook Promise has been tremendous in adding categories so that students can tip in inappropriate behavior by an adult. If they think that there's a child that is watching dangerous things or talking dangerous or maybe a harm to themselves or others. We have utilized this anonymous reporting system in all aspects of school safety, letting the children know. We are going to also push it out to 4th and 5th graders this school year, because we have gotten quite a few schools who want it for the 4th and 5th graders. We are also going to launch the Start with Hello, which is the foundational program as it relates to Sandy Hook Promise. Our concern and our justification or rationale, if you will, for that is because we would like to see some of the numbers of bullying go down. And we know that one of the beginning is the isolation of a child. And so the Start with Hello is going to be something that we're going to start utilizing this fall. Again, this is a small effort as it relates to how many schools, but Sandy Hook is taking them on as quick as they can so that we can utilize that. And I'm hoping everybody knows what Say Something Anonymous reporting system is, but we have 27 categories, and the calls are 24/7, 365. I go down once a year, meet with staff, talk with the crisis center about how they interact and engage with the children of North Carolina. We talk about the life-saving tips and ways to streamline the process so that if it is a actual life safety tip, a suicide or a physical threat, that we address it as soon as possible with the most sensitivity, accuracy, and speed. These are some of the numbers for last school year, the top 10 that we had, and bullying and cyberbullying. Since we started this app or this system in 2019, bullying and cyberbullying has consistently been #1, and it stays #1, hence why we're looking at the Start with Hello program to see if we can get some of those numbers down. And that's also why we're utilizing the student engagement to see, it's easy for the adults to say, but if we can get in there and talk with the children. But these are the numbers. I heard him talk about, Mr. Williams, I think it was, about planned school attacks or school attacks. And these are the tips that we have had as of last year as it relates to some type of planned school attack. And so this was from July 1 through June 30th of this past school year. This is furthering our student engagement. The center feels that it is important to include administrators, students, and parents. But one of the things that the student engagement team has come up with is a Teen Tech Talk Tuesday. I've talked about it before, but I love it. It talks to children about online safety, about cyberbullying, about any of those things to help children be safer and make better decisions online. That comes out on Tuesday on Instagram and X for the children. And we get a lot of feedback from the children, so we appreciate that. Our operations grant funding, we will, I believe it comes out Friday, the application for the SROs. We do it every 2 years. Prior to me being the director, we were doing it every year, and I felt like every 2 years gives us an opportunity to allow the PSUs to find the SRO and to hire and/or train them. So that will come out, and that will be for 24-25 and 25-26. I talked earlier about my multidisciplinary team, and they are a group of law enforcement, social workers, counselors who helped us with the BTAM. And they are helping us with the best utilization of an SRO, because that is also something that we were tasked to do as it relates to school safety. I said earlier that I think the participants of a great school safety is the students, the administrators, and the parent. And so we started a parent engagement committee last year, and we're working with that to hear from parents. There are 3 parents in each of the 8 regions of the state, and 2 from districts, 2 from a district and 1 from a charter. And they work with my staff, and they will work with the regional safety specialists in their area to get information out to the parents, to help engage parents, to help show parents that they are part of the solution as it relates to school safety. And the regional safety specialists will meet with safety advisors. We started a school safety advisory council, and those are school safety directors who have had experience, and we try to have them to support the other school safety directors in that area who are brand new. Because there's not always districts don't always have the funding to hire someone just to do safety. So sometimes our school safety directors have several jobs. And so our school safety advisory council are more seasoned, experienced safety directors, and they're there to support the new inexperienced school safety director. The center is launching its first, this one is not an annual report, it's 21 to 24 report that will go on our website in September. And then after that, at our RISE, we will do the annual report. And so we're looking forward for people to see what we have accomplished between 21 and 24. And we also have developed a strategic plan from 24 to 28 to help us in guiding what we need to do based on legislative requirements and the vision of our superintendent. And that is it.
Right, thank you, Karen. Does anybody have any questions for Karen? You can come off mute and ask them, or you can put them in the chat. I think we had a couple in the chat. One was, Karen, can we send out the link to the guidance document that you were talking about?
Yes, I'll get that to you guys, and then you can send it out. Yes.
Great. Okay, Yvonne.
Hi, thank you. A great presentation. That was really informative. I really appreciate it. I guess my question is around the Say Something, which sounds like an amazing resource, and looking at that data, wondering what type of intersection, if any, you have with 988. 988 is analogous to 911, or at least so we want it to be eventually, but there's going to be a teen peer warm line associated with 988. Really only about 10% of our calls are related to crisis. The rest of them are just, kids and adults needing somebody to talk to. So it's really effective in that regard. Just wondering what type of intersection, if any, you have with 988.
We have, to my knowledge, we have not. I can definitely take it back to the Sandy Hook Promise team, because I don't want to speak for them on what they do intersects with 988. I'm sure that they're more familiar with it, but yes, I will definitely take that back to them and see what they say. And it could be that it already does. Karen just doesn't know about it.
Great, thank you.
Rachel, you got a question?
Yeah, more of a comment. Good morning, everyone. Karen, I was thinking about when you were talking about the tip line, and also rolling out Teen Mental Health First Aid. Just kind of curious if you'll be looking at data to see if there's any increase in the tips as Teen Mental Health First Aid rolls out, because I would I guess the assumption would be that as it rolls out, more teens are aware of mental health and substance use, signs and symptoms and how to report and where to get resources that you might see an increase in the tips. So is there a plan to kind of look to see if that rollout of teen mental health first aid across the state maybe has an impact on the tips that are coming in?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Yes, we will. Will be looking at it as it relates to the categories related to, I guess, mental health. That yes. So the answer is yes.
Any other questions? You can raise your hand or you can just come off mute and ask it if you got a question.
Dr. Fairley, I actually have a question for you, if you do not mind. One of our task force members had reached out to me to ask if there was funding available to get teachers trained at their local school on teen mental health first aid. Are you aware of any funding sources for that?
I am not. Maybe that's something DHHS has, but let me say this, we are in the process of writing a grant to secure that help. And it is my intent to ask for monies in the long session as well. But right now, no, I don't know any per se.
Thank you so much, and I would love to chat with you offline about that and make a connection.
Jared, actually, you're right. I'm sorry. That you're right. There is money in DHHS. We've did a big appropriation this year, actually from the governor's office specifically. I think it falls under the secretary's office, although we're managing it under DHHS. So we are going to partner with DPI on rolling out more mental health first aid. There's actually a big push under my portfolio, Division of Child and Family Wellbeing. We're investing at least $10 to $15 million in mental health resources for schools, specifically inclusive of mental health first aid. So I'd be happy to share that information with you offline, for give you a slide or something so that you can share with the rest of the group.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, before we move on to the next presentation, we were capturing the role, and I've got everybody that's got their name on the screen showing up. We've already got you down, but there are 2 phone numbers that are showing up that I don't know who those belong to. We just want to make sure that we capture everybody that's in the meeting. So if you've called in on a phone, if you could just come off mute real quick and tell us who you are, so we make sure that we've captured you for the overall attendance for the meeting.
Christine Redden is here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate it.
Well, Alan Duncan is here.
Alan Duncan. Great. Thank you, sir. All right, I think we got everybody then. We'll move on. And Sierra, are you ready to present?
Yep.
All right, so let me introduce Sierra Scott. She is the Executive Director for the Office of Violence Prevention, and I'm extremely excited to have her here today to tell you about this new initiative that's going on across the state of North Carolina. I guess it's not that new anymore, so got a year under its belt, but Sierra is still an office of one, but I'm excited to have her tell you a little bit about this new initiative that's going on across the state of North Carolina. So I'll hand it over to you, Sierra.
Thank you, Billy. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great. All right, let me get my screen share going. Okay, are you seeing my slides?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks for having me, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and to share a little bit about our office, the Office of Violence Prevention, which is housed within Department of Public Safety. So I'll just be telling you all a little bit about our office, who we are, what we do, and hopefully illuminating how we may be able to be a resource or a partner to you. So just background about our origin. Our office, as Billy said, is getting a little older. We were established back in March of 2023 through executive order by the governor. And so at that time, our office joined just a small group of state OVPs across the country. And also at the time, we were the first in the South. And as far as we know it, we are still the only state OVP in the South, which we think is big, and our colleagues and leaders across the country also remind us that this is also a big accomplishment for our state and helping to chart a path forward for what this type of coordination can look like in Southern states. And so the mission of our office is to reduce violence, harm from violence, and firearm misuse in North Carolina. And that comes from some of the core tenets that were put in that executive order. And so the vision that our office would like to see is a North Carolina where all communities have the tools, resources, and expertise needed to create and maintain safety and well-being. And our approach to this is to foster collaboration across sectors and leverage the public health approach to support local communities in deploying evidence-based programs and strategies. Partnership between public safety and public health is an important component of that approach. And we've been working to try to model this type of collaboration here from our office, starting with the placement of our office in DPS, but then with the expertise of our team coming from public health backgrounds, and then our close collaboration with our public health partners at DHHS. And so in terms of what we do, our office serves as a trusted resource and provides guidance, direction, and support to entities seeking to initiate, expand, or improve their violence prevention efforts. And so as a state OVP, we function just a bit differently than a local OVP, which we find at times folks are a bit more familiar with local OVPs because there are more of them around the country, and there were a couple in our state before our office was established. And so the main difference between the two are that as a state OVP, we are not as involved in leading initiatives and boots on the ground work happening in communities. That is more the scope of a local OVP, but we're more so working at a macro level to help build capacity for violence prevention efforts across the state, prepare and empower local communities to do this work, and then ensure that the infrastructure and buy-in needed is there to enable this work to move forward and be done effectively. And so currently we're focused on doing this through 4 primary functions that we just summarize as connect, convene, collaborate, and train. So connecting people to resources, information, subject matter experts, and other people and partners to support their violence prevention work, providing convening opportunities to provide networking and opportunities for peer-to-peer learning and more community collaboration. And then our office is also collaborating and working with local, state, and national entities to increase our collective impact on violence prevention in our state and demonstrate that whole of community coordination. And then we're also working to develop and facilitate host training opportunities to prepare communities to effectively implement evidence-based strategies and to measure their impact. And so topic-wise, right now, our office is, as far as different areas of violence go, our office is currently focusing our efforts around addressing community violence and its intersections with firearm violence. And this prioritization was based on, one, just the limited capacity of our office as we work on building our team, and we just needed to narrow in on a starting place for our work. And then also based on an identified need and gap as far as state level attention and coordination towards this area of violence goes. And so in terms of who we serve, our audiences, as we see it, are the people and entities leading and carrying out violence prevention efforts in local communities, and then the people and entities enabling this work to happen. So essentially, we are a resource and a support to the people that are supporting local communities in violence prevention efforts. And so some examples of what that audience could look like are city and county agencies, local OVPs, community-based organizations, health departments, law enforcement agencies, U.S. attorneys' offices, hospitals. And those are just a few examples, but not an all-inclusive list. But since our office was established, we've received many requests from groups within these categories that are looking for support from us in a variety of ways for their existing or new programs that they're looking to establish in their local areas. So in terms of our office infrastructure, as Billy mentioned, currently I'm a team of one, so we are a small staff. And that is partly due to just the typical woes of building a new office from the ground up, but also due to funding limitations. And so we've been working to get creative about how we build up this office. And a big part of that has been our partnership with DHHS. They've played a significant role in helping to build and sustain the infrastructure for our office. And currently, we don't have any state funds in the budget allocated to the office. And so again, that close partnership between DPS and DHHS has been crucial for helping to sustain our team. And we do have a special provision pending in the General Assembly to hopefully make OVP a permanent office. So we'd love to see that happen. But in the meantime, we've been looking for other avenues to help build the capacity of our office and the work that we'd like to do. And we have received some grant funding that's going to help us with expanding our capacity to do training and technical assistance related to our community violence prevention work. And those grants are those are federal grant funds from the Bureau of Justice Assistance, from their Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Initiative, which was awarded to the Governor's Crime Commission, and we were fortunate enough to get a sub-award. So that's really going to help us with, like I said, building that capacity for training and technical assistance work, primarily through being able to hire a couple new staff members. Excuse me. So another component of our office is our Community Violence Advisory Board, and maybe one of my favorite components. So per the executive order, the advisory board was established towards the later half of last year. And it's a working advisory board that I really see as an extension of our programmatic team. So the board is comprised of diverse representation from people that are within local community violence prevention ecosystems across the state. So there's representation from law enforcement, from health departments, research centers, community-based organizations, hospitals, etc. So we do also have participation from different state partners, but as far as our actual members go, it again is just completely representative of people within local community violence prevention ecosystems. And our advisory board has really been a help to expand the reach of our office and providing input and support for a variety of OVP activities, including our strategic planning, which they have spent a good portion of their time over these past several months focusing on. So in terms of our past year's activities, we've been focusing a lot on building the infrastructure of our office, again, starting a new office from the ground up. And so we've been focusing a lot on that while also trying to balance and manage the high demand that we've been getting for support from communities around the state. And so in that time, we've been able to make a lot of progress as far as our core functions go in our connecting, convening, and collaborating functions. And this has included things like building relationships with local violence prevention programs, advising local communities, initiating new programs, disseminating state and national funding opportunities, and then establishing that community violence advisory board and really getting that off the ground. And so upcoming in the remainder of this year, this is actually a great time to be doing this presentation because we have a lot of things on the horizon. So we'll be continuing our efforts around connecting, convening, and collaborating and moving that work forward. But we're also going to be able to focus a bit more on our training and technical assistance work as well. And so some of those things are going to include releasing our strategic plan, which as of yesterday, I feel comfortable saying is coming in September of this year. And then we'll also be working to move forward on planning for implementation of that plan shortly after we release it. And then we're also going to be hosting a statewide community violence prevention convening that is going to take place November 19th and 20th. So we recently sent out a save the date for that. And that event is really intended to be a networking and learning opportunity for folks from every corner of our state that are engaging in and leading, initiating, implementing community violence prevention efforts. We'll also be working on expanding our team, again, hiring 2 new positions through those grant funds that are going to really help with moving forward some of our training activities. And then we'll also be, again, hosting trainings, developing resources, educational materials, and trying to get some of those things out the door between now and the end of the year. And so that is all that I have for you all today. My contact information is on the screen, and that QR code is to sign up for our listserv to just keep up with any updates and announcements from our office for anyone who's interested. But yeah, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sierra. So we'll open the floor for questions. If anybody's got any questions for Sierra. You must have done an awesome job too, Sierra.
Exactly, thorough job.
All right, thank you.
So one of the things the reasons why I wanted Sierra to present is, obviously this is the task force for safer schools, and OVP is really focused more on community violence, which, schools are part of our communities, obviously. And I've said for years that schools are reflections of their communities. So if you've got a gang problem in your community, you're probably going to have a gang problem in your school. And so this really, this conversation about OVP is to expand the reach of where can we try to work on these issues to make sure that those issues that are occurring in those communities don't creep into our schools. And so I hope that as task force members, if you're interested in going to the conference in November, that you'll take advantage of that and take part of that in that conversation moving forward, because I think the collaboration here between the Center for Safer Schools and the Office of Violence Prevention is extremely important and can lead to us having a comprehensive plan for the state of North Carolina of how do we really make sure our kids are safe in our communities and in our schools. So thanks, Sierra. Appreciate the presentation. If there are no questions for her, I'm going to move us on, and we're ahead of schedule. So hopefully, Scott, you're ready. You are. I'm going to turn it over to you. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Billy. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, let me do a couple switches and share the screen. And we will kick things off. All right. Well, again, thank you all. I appreciate it. I'm Scott Preschel-Bell. I'm an epidemiologist with the Division of Public Health, and I've been there for about 20 years now, for the last 15 or so working on injury and violence. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share kind of our perspective on some of the work that's happening in our state and give a little bit of background. So again, thank you for inviting me today. My plan today is really just to kind of go through some of the recent kind of background related to this work, share some larger scale injury data for all ages, again, talk about some events and activities from mostly the past year or so. And then I added at the very end, if I had time, and it looks like I do, to provide some additional data that are among school-age children across our state. And then, of course, if there's questions and we can or discussion around any of these things. So I'm going to start, with almost 2 years ago now, October 2022. There was a Raleigh shooting that involved 5 people, and I think that was a watershed moment for lots of the work that we're doing at the moment. I've been working in this space for a little bit of time, but I feel like there was a lot of activities subsequent to that shooting that have really enabled us to kind of move this work really forward. Now, I'll also say that, I hate that it takes kind of one of these events for us to really move forward, because for some people, it's a daily feature of their life and in their community. And right now we average around 5 people a day who die from a firearm injury in the state of North Carolina. And, the data that we have coming from one of our systems, the VDRS, has about, nearly 1,800 people who died in 2022 as a result of a firearm injury. Now, again, that event happened in October, and in November there was a big convening of lots of different people, probably many people in the room among this group, and kind of co-led by both Secretary Kinsley and Secretary Buffalo, as well as Dr. Tilson from Department of Health and Human Services. And they convened a series of roundtables and met with experts across our state and actually across the nation, and developed kind of this white paper describing strategies to reduce firearm violence that would focus on self-harm and suicide, but also interpersonal injury and homicide, as well as some of the unintentional deaths related to this. As Ciara mentioned, the executive, under the executive order from Governor Cooper last March, the Office of Violence Prevention was opened. And again, there's lots of great work that has been happening in collaboration with this office. And I think we're really starting to kind of see some of those benefits. And with the strategic plan that's coming up, we'll be able to even highlight more of those in the future. And again, there's a bit of a focus on firearms when it comes to violent deaths in our state. And our state, like every state in the nation, vast majority of these deaths are basically as a result of firearms. So I'm gonna kind of go back and forth between violent death, which encompasses all sorts of different methods, from firearms to poisonings to blunt instruments. But I'll also try to focus a handful of things related to firearms specifically. So again, looking at the past 10 years or so, 64% of all violent deaths occurring in the state of North Carolina were the result of a firearm. And this is a slide that I frequently share, and it talks about the people who die. Again, this is violent deaths, so this is all types of violent deaths, and this is rates per 100,000. So we're able to compare between various populations. And you can see at the bottom, this is among age groups. So from the less than 1-year-olds all the way up to 85 and older. And you can see there's this little curve that starts to happen and really starts to increase from age 10 to 15, 19 to 24, and then it subsequently goes down a little bit, but not completely down. And I've used this slide for a lot of time, again, last 10 plus years that I've been doing some of this work. And I really felt like it was more important to start also sharing some of the kind of the counterfactual. And, what would this look like? This slide right here, if you were to just take out the firearm related deaths. So doing that, if you were to look again at the past 5 years of data, you would see about 8,000 deaths that would be averted. And again, that curve would be fundamentally changed. So again, the effort working in communities around firearm violence in particular is really critical and would save, many, many lives and many, many birthdays. So this chart here is specifically for firearm related deaths. So again, looking at those 1,700 firearm related deaths over the last 10 years, males by, almost 6 times as many males as females die by firearm related violence. Black, non-Hispanic, and American Indian rates are incredibly high. Again, I think sometimes people are surprised by the American Indian non-Hispanic rate being as high as it is, but we do have a large population of American Indians, the largest east of the Mississippi River. And so this is an important population as well. And again, these are firearm deaths of all types. So this includes both suicide and homicide. And again, you can see, a clear pattern among age groups where the 19 to 24-year-olds are much higher than any other age group. When you split out these violent deaths and focus again on the homicide by firearm and homicide by suicide, again, by age group, you see this disturbing pattern that at the age of 10, all of a sudden, both lines kind of jump exponentially up. And then if you follow that homicide trend line, it starts to actually go down over age and goes way down by the time, you're above 45, 55. I think, again, what's surprising for some people is they might not realize that firearm by suicide actually increases among age groups, older age groups, so 45, 55, 65 and higher. And again, that's work that we've done over time, and important to just kind of make sure that gets shared out. These are looking at unintentional firearms. And so again, these are deaths where people have been determined by the medical examiner to have had an unintentional firearm. These are people who might be cleaning their firearm or showing or playing with a firearm. And again, as you can see, a lot of these deaths happen that are self-inflicted. So people who are either cleaning or doing something else. Still a fairly high male phenomenon. And then when you look at those age groups, it does kind of level off for the unintentional firearm deaths. But the highest age group are still some of the youngest age groups. Shifting a little bit to self-inflicted injury, emergency department visits. So again, this is a map of all 100 counties looking at rates per 100,000 from July of last year to June of 2023. So about a year's worth of data. And again, we see this pattern of self-inflicted injury that occurs across our state. And of course, we have lots of people in programs who are trying to work as well as school systems to decrease some of those self-injured rates. So again, just to kind of summarize in some ways, these are firearm deaths in particular, and this for 2021, they're slightly increased for 2022, but we have about 1,800 deaths, about 1,500 firearm-related hospitalizations, about 4,000 emergency department visits across the state. And of course, through some survey work, we know that roughly 800,000 adults store their firearm locked and or loaded and unlocked. And that's estimated that about 3.5 million adults in North Carolina have a firearm in or around the home. So some of the dissemination and some of the other work that we've done is part of something called NC Faster. NC Faster was a 3-year funded CDC project that ended last year, but we're trying to continue some of the reporting and dissemination that goes along with that. These are reporting out specifically firearm-related injuries that occur in emergency departments across our state. We have 131 emergency departments in North Carolina. We get feeds from all 131 every day, actually 3 times a day, and then usually about a month later, those numbers and files and cases solidify to the point where we feel comfortable reporting some of that information out. So this is about as near real-time information as we can get. And if you go to the website that's listed at the bottom corner there, you'll see the most recent quarterly report. So we're trying to produce 4 of these a year. And we generally put them out about a quarter behind. So we probably have a couple from 2024 posted already. Again, something that maybe people have seen in the past, but this is coming from a survey or known as the BRFSS and the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And this was information around storage of firearms, and it has really led to some of the efforts that Deputy Secretary Lassiter and others are involved in with NC Safe, and about the safe storage of firearms that we have. It can continue to have kind of high risk related to those firearms that are kept unsafe, not safely stored across our state. So we're hoping to really see some, changes along this area. There've been, again, a lot of efforts to really emphasize some of that work. As part of that survey, there was also a question asked among high school students. And again, about 30% of high school students say they could be ready to fire a loaded gun in less than an hour without a parent or other adult's permission. And of course, there's the financial toll related to firearm and injury violence on the state of North Carolina, estimated combined cost of over $18 billion for 2022, which is about $1,700 per citizen. So again, I know Billy and others have provided lots of information about NC Safe, and I just have a couple of slides about things that we've noticed. It does look like there are a lot of local school districts and others working to incorporate NC Safe. And it's exciting to hear that there's probably going to be more in the future. But this past year, Wake school system tried to emphasize some of that work as well. And I know that there's some active work in Durham as well around the policies related to safe storage of firearms. Part of our work at the division is also working with local health departments to create county safety teams and to create a gun safety team. These, again, are led by local health departments, represent a coalition of representatives from the community, including firearm owners. And it's a modest step toward community safety, but around 8 of these counties have started this initiative. And 2 of which, Pitt County and Durham County. Durham has had a firearm safety team for many years now, but Pitt County, which is a rural county, Greenville, North Carolina, only started about a year ago. And again, you can see they have lots of different media related to it and have themed it related to kind of their area, and have had a lot of success related to that work. Our office also houses the Comprehensive Suicide Prevention Program. This is, again, an initiative funded by the CDC. The state has a Suicide Prevention Action Plan. And again, a national strategy for suicide prevention was just released a couple months ago, trying to, again, organize at like the highest levels. And again, just pointing out that 63% of those North Carolina suicides are by firearm. And if you were to split out the urban and rural, it actually increases on the rural suicides to 72%. A handful of people in this room were probably also involved in the North Carolina Medical Journal that was released essentially last year at this time, so the 1-year anniversary. It was an issue dedicated specifically on firearm injury and violence. It had articles and commentaries by Governor Cooper, Secretary Kinsley, Secretary Buffalo, as well as Deputy Secretary Lassiter and Dr. Tilson, among many others across our state, talking about the things that people are doing in the evidence base, that prevention programs that people are working on across North Carolina. There was also in September a meeting conference with 150 people in person in Concord, North Carolina, which was a partnership between our department, Health and Human Services, Department of Public Safety, and the North Carolina Public Health Association. And again, we brought in 35 national and state speakers and distributed about 1,000 gun locks. And the data that I shared previous with the violent death reporting system is also available online. So any of you who want to, you can take this QR code and load your phone up are able to do that. And the dashboard again has things by state, has things by county, and we continue to try to add and update that to that dashboard as much as we can. So now let me focus the last little bit on some school age data. So I had our team kind of look at, and we just chose the ages of 6 to 18-year-olds for part of this data that we would consider school age. Of course, there are differences, between some of these things, and not all of them are necessarily in school, but it ended up being about 750 kids from this 5-year period from 2018 to 2022. And again, just looking at the overall violent death rates per 100,000, again, you see some similar trends, just at slightly lower rates, which is good to see, but also still higher than they should be. Again, males nearly 4 times as high as females. Black, non-Hispanic, and American Indian non-Hispanic have the highest rates, and you can definitely see the most at risk are those 15 to 18-year-olds with the highest rate. Again, in 2022, over half, 56% of all violent deaths among North Carolina youth aged 6 to 18 were homicides. In 2019, this homicide trend crossed over suicide, which it also did in other states as well. But historically, if you were to look for time before that, generally the suicide numbers have always been higher than homicides up until the past couple of years. The mechanisms are different and these are looking at youth suicides involving firearms. There still is a disproportionate number that are firearm related, but you can also see that there's a significant number of hanging or strangulation suicides that occur among this population. And again, we feel like this system is helpful to help us in terms of prevention because it talks about circumstances. And in the case of suicide for these are from 10 to 18-year-olds, so 330 or 300 plus suicides in our state. About a quarter of males and about a fifth of all females disclosed intent, meaning that they told someone their suicide behavior before the event occurred. And so again, we see that as a possible prevention window, and we work really hard and closely with lots of different people to do kind of gatekeeper trainings and other trainings to make sure that everyone who is who might come across someone who discusses suicide ideation or suicide to take them seriously, and to make sure that those people are referred to services and other places or 988 or different things that are out there. Again, I think sometimes people dismiss some of those comments, or sometimes people will not know how to respond. And so again, there's been a big effort with some of these the trainings to not only do like the counselors and the teachers, but the coaches and the bus drivers and the janitors and everyone else involved in these school systems. So we really think that that's critical. And again, some of the data we have is suggesting that, these kids and other people too, it's a very true phenomenon among adults, tell people. And so we want to make sure that people are provided the resources they need to stay alive. Again, switching to youth homicides in the past 5 years, 93% involved firearm. A quarter of those homicides among female youth involved intimate partner violence. Again, another similar trend that happens among all ages, but is also seen among this school age group from 6 to 18. And again, looking at some of the ED visits, so these are not necessarily fatal, but looking at some of the self-inflicted injuries by age group. And again, you can see, people of lower ages are less likely to do self-inflicted injury, and that results in an emergency department setting. But you also can see that 12 to 14 had increased post-COVID, and the same trend as well for the 15 to 18-year-olds. So something that we've certainly been monitoring and trying to make sure that we're addressing as much as possible. So let me end the formal presentation here and turn back to folks. And again, I can't see the chat or anything, so if there's questions, I'm happy to try to answer and respond. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Scott. We really appreciate it. Great presentation, and thanks for the excellent overview. I think the only thing I see in the chat is from Yvonne about mentioning 988 again, and as a resource, especially with some of the suicide numbers that you were just presenting. So making sure that comment is heard. Are there other questions that people have, or other comments that people would like to make before Scott drops out on this?
Yeah, and I think I see a comment now about sharing the presentation. Happy to share it. And there are other presentations. I mean, this is just a small little smidgen of some of the information that we have available. And we also have various listservs for sharing information. So if anyone would like to receive either those quarterly reports or other kind of surveillance things from public health, including overdose, we're happy to share that with people. Just pass that along to the group and share your email, and we'll happily add you to those lists.
So we'll send out an email to the whole task force that kind of gives them links to those two to the resources Scott just mentioned, and a copy of all the PowerPoints that we've gotten today. If you haven't gotten a copy of it, we will email those copies to all the task force members, so you guys will have copies of those. other questions that people have or comments? Always have this uncomfortable silence with the virtual meetings. You don't know for sure if anybody wants to jump in or not. So I don't see any right now. So I appreciate your presentation, Scott. Excellent job as always. And Scott's group does an awesome job of collecting this data and really disseminating it across the state. And it's given us, I know for the work that we've done on NC Safe, the information and data has been extremely important to help us spread the message about how important safe storage is. But you can also see all the other trends that we're seeing on firearm-related deaths that Scott was tracking. And I think we've talked about it at the task force meetings in the past. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey data that's extremely important here. And the reason why we need to continue to do that Youth Risk Behavior Survey, I know there were some questions about that in the past about that. And I know Alan Duncan brought that up as an issue. Obviously, this data is extremely important for us to make important decisions on. So I think, Yvonne, you just raised your hand. Did you have a question?
Yeah, if we wait too long, I'm going to come up with a question. So thank you. Really appreciate that presentation, alarming and sobering and all of those things, right? But my question is, for the increase in homicide, that change in trend, I believe it was for the kids, the change in trend looked like it was post 2020. Wondering if we have anything that we're attributing that to, because it's quite stark and it's surprising to me. It's my first time I've seen that actual slide. So wonder what's going on with homicide versus suicide.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question. I mean, I think there are lots of different theories on what is led to that increase, but I'm not sure there's consensus on, what those really are. But obviously, there were incredible, challenges in terms of people's personal safety, and that resulted in many people buying firearms, perhaps for the first time. And so there was lots of those types of situations. I think that, again, early on, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but, during that time, people in 2020, 2021, it was just a very, different time in terms of, accessing resources. And, we saw, pretty substantial increases in overdose death at the same time. So we saw lots of these kind of injuries and violence kind of increasing during kind of that COVID and post-COVID period. It's only now that we're really starting to hopefully see them return to kind of pre-COVID numbers. And so hopefully we'll see this one change as well. Time will tell, but right now, we've monitored the trend. I'm not sure what we can directly associate it to, but it's very disconcerting for sure.
Well, and I note that only because, what we're doing in DHHS, our efforts are focused, particularly as it relates to children and family, our efforts are focused on sort of, the population that we see this increase in suicide, right, and suicidal ideation. But we've not really done anything around the area of homicide. And and honestly, we're seeing it a little bit more. I'm seeing cases where we're dealing with children who are involved in these cases, and trying to find treatment is, so I'm connecting this to treatment, right? How do we treat children in this situation? So that's going to be our work. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, and along with the Office of Violence Prevention, again, I think that they have, a lot of different partners, and there have been many communities who have invested in community safety and are doing things like, even the hospital systems and having hospital-based violence intervention programs and wraparound services and things that are dealing more with, both the immediate need and then kind of the long-term need of people in those communities and those systems, and how they can kind of keep them from coming back or coming into the system again. So hopefully a lot of those efforts will come to fruition, and we'll see some, lasting impacts from them.
Thank you.
I got Sheriff Rogers and then Rachel, you'll be after Sheriff Rogers, but Sheriff Rogers, did you have a question?
I don't think I really had much of a question. I think when we look at the fact that the homicide rate went up with the kids, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that breaking and entering in cars went up, guns, people leaving guns in the cars, leaving guns unsecured at home, or better yet, buying the guns through the black market or underground market. These kids are able to get guns better than we can. And I think the idea of it is just community policing is going to be the key to some of it. Not the answer to all of it, but the key to a lot of it, I think. Getting out the vehicles. And I talk with our units about making sure being able to get out the cars and talk to people. So, it is disturbing. The youth that we see now, the homicides that we're seeing, anywhere from the ages of 14 to 15 years old and up, where the kids are taking lives of themselves, of other people at the same age group or older. And it is very disturbing. And especially when you think that you may have an idea, everybody want to create a new program. I think we have enough programs. I believe that what we need to do is actually implement those programs that we have and have the people understand how important it is that these programs come together and work with the community, parents. So it's a lot. I mean, so much going on, and it's very disturbing. I mean, we had a couple weeks ago in the city of Greensboro. I think there was 3 teenagers at the age of 14 and 15, 13, 14, and 15, I think it was, a head-on collision with the Greensboro officer, and the kids perished in the accident. The officer is doing better, for what I understand. But and this is not like at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening. This is at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. So parents are not. I mean, I know people say, well, you can't put a lot on the parents. Well, I think we can a lot of stuff, but I just think that in order to work to bring a solution or to try to help prevent some of this stuff, is that we're just gonna have to blend in together and make it work. The judicial system, all of us, all the way through. But these kids are getting these guns, and it's unfortunate that they're getting them. It is, and they're getting powerful guns. They're not used to be not the 22s anymore. They're getting the large guns, the guns that we carry, and or better. So hopefully we can find a way to reduce it. But I don't foresee it getting any better if we don't find a solution. I just don't.
Thank you, Sheriff Rogers. Excellent points and amen.
Yeah, I'd just like to add on a comment to that. Yeah, thanks, Sheriff Rogers. Appreciate it. That was some of the work that North Carolina Medical Journal was trying to provide, is that there is a lot of great work happening across the state, and we just need to implement and focus on some of that work. So it's not as if we need to invent new things. I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's nice when there are some new programs and more involvement and definitely more resources, but there are programs that have shown to be effective. There are communities who are doing some of this work, and we just need to make sure we share that with other communities, and we get more of the people focusing on the things that work.
Rachel?
Thank you. And I thank you, Scott, for the presentation. I think some of the initial silence was there's so much data and information, just kind of processing the data, but how so all of it connects to the programs and things that we already know exist that can have a positive impact. My question was about the slide that Yvonne referenced, where the homicide is going up above suicide. Do we know, like with that number increasing, is it youth that are taking the lives of other youth that's causing that to go up? Is it adults taking the lives of youth that's causing that to go up, or some mixture of both? Do we have that data available?
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure we've looked at it by suspect. Sometimes we don't know who the suspect is, so we don't know, who is actually involved. On the intimate partner violence, we usually know the suspect, which is great because then we have that information, and of course they're usually similar-ish age type folks. We haven't looked at that suspect age in a while, and that's something that we could probably look at. So I'll try to have our team zero in on that, and happy to share that information back if we can generate something that's meaningful. But I don't know off the top of my head.
I guess to share Roger's point about we have all these programs that already exist and just implementing the programs we have. I don't count myself to be a data expert at all, but when I think about all the various programs, I think about how can we measure collective impact of the programs? Is there a way to measure the collective impact of, we're doing all these different mental health first aid courses. We're trying to train people to recognize the signs and symptoms to support children. We're doing boots on the ground work, like having caring adults in the communities and in the schools that interact with children so that they have a safe space to go to report concerns through things like the anonymous reporting app. And then we have, just all types of efforts that are happening in all types of places. You mentioned community policing and getting out of the cars and actually talking to people. Is there a way that we can measure the impact of all of these things collectively and how they might positively impact the reduction of both suicide and, homicide and just violence in general as it relates to our youth? So I don't know if anybody has an answer to that question, just more of a thought that I'm kind of putting out there. Is there a way for us to be able to do something like that?
Well, I can speak on behalf of some of the programs that I'm familiar with. I mean, generally, there's usually only funding to do the program side of it and very little on the evaluation, which is unfortunate. But there are people and there are groups, and we have lots of academic centers in our state that would love to evaluate these programs, and places like RTI and others who would love to, be involved. I don't know if there's any kind of, I guess with enough study design, there'd be ways to really figure out how each one of them works together. But I know for some of the programs by themselves, there are a handful that are getting evaluated and at the level that they need to be evaluated, kind of independently evaluated. And so hopefully, again, we can share the results from some of that work. I think, again, it's the funding priorities make some of that really challenging, like I said, because usually the funds are to do the program, not necessarily to do the evaluation of the program. But I think it's a great question. It's really important, and we should do a better job of evaluating to know what is working, and be able, again, to share that information across various districts and various counties.
And we've got a guest in the room that wants to, if you'll introduce yourself.
Well, good morning. My name is Ty Green. I'm a retired juvenile gang detective from Long Island, New York. I was born in North Carolina and raised in New York and North Carolina. I spent my time in both areas. I was a juvenile gang detective in Long Island in an area which was very concentrated with gangs, Village of Hempstead, Nassau County. I was there for 11 years. And I want to piggyback. I want to thank Danny Rogers for inviting me to this, Sheriff Rogers for inviting me to this task force. This is so important and how much is needed in all the communities of state of North Carolina. And also Nathan Trees, Captain Trees, who is also partnering with me. I know firsthand what the impact of a law enforcement officer in schools do if it's done appropriately. My town was spiraling out of control, and the school board put the DARE program and the GREAT program into implementation. And I was a DARE officer. It was drugs awareness, resistant education, and GREAT was gang resistant education. And I cannot tell you, my social media is flooded with my students today even. They remember me from when I was their DARE teacher in 7th grade, 6th grade. And that's invaluable, and what is missing in our community now, in my humble opinion. I've been out of law enforcement now since 2007. I'm a financial geek now for law enforcement officers, actually. But I never forget how important it was, how those kids can, we did lesson plans in the classroom. I graduated 1,100 students over the course of 10 years out of my DARE and GREAT programs. I mean, I cannot tell you how the homicides and the crime and the way we were viewed in the community changed exponentially over those 11 years. Now, I'm not sure what happened to those programs and why they haven't been re-executed. I'm sure it's funding, because they had to pay us overtime to do it. They had to pay us as a part from being police work, because I'm in the classroom 27 weeks a year teaching as a teacher. But I cannot tell you the power and the effect on the youth. We had to figure out a way to stop crime in our town, and working with the adults wasn't working. But we can get to the crop that's coming in. 14, 15-year-olds coming to turn 18, 19. And it just reminded my last few years as a police officer in New York, it was incredible how much it decreased. I just wanted to share that information from firsthand knowledge.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. We
Honored
appreciate you.
to be here. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I do,
Yes.
Mr. Lester. Mr. Green, I thank you for being here. I do want to say this. It almost does not matter about what board meeting I go to when we begin to start talking about the issues that we have in this great country called America. The problem that we're doing is that we're over talking and we're talking around and around and around in circles about the same thing. And until our federal government, and I'm going to stand on this, I believe this, until our federal government put the monies back into the institutions, the mental health institutions, we are going to continue to have this problem. And this problem is stems from the fact of when these babies are born, or better yet, before they're born, their mothers must be treated before they are born. And the babies have to be treated when they're born. And as they growing up and being raised up as toddlers and as adolescents and young teenagers, the treatment must have started before they get to young adulthood. Matter of fact, before they even get to adolescenthood or teenagers. So we keep talking about the same thing. We really do. And I'm gonna be honest with you, and you may ask me not to ever come back. But until we can get this thing here from the federal government like they need to do it and put it back, these institutions back in position and give the people the mental health care that they need, as well as the medical care that these communities need, we're gonna keep fighting this fight. We're gonna keep giving them the open door to the things that they're doing. Homicides, suicides. I have noticed in the last several months, and I brought it to the major's attention the other week. I see no major, I've seen more African American, or have heard more African American males in this area committing suicide than I've ever heard. That's real talk. I don't want anybody to commit suicide. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But when you follow and you see and you hear, something is wrong. And the problem is all the way upstairs. The federal government has to put the monies back into the institution that we need, and we need qualified people to teach, or better yet, to serve the people that need the help. And I just wanted to say that. I'm gonna tell you, we can't arrest ourselves out of it. We cannot write new bills every 2 or 3 years to try to get ourselves out of it. We have to spend the money, and until they do that, we're gonna have an issue. And the question is, and I'm done, why aren't they spending the money? Why aren't they putting the monies back in the Title I communities, or the urban communities, or the communities that need the help? Why aren't they doing that? There's a reason. There's a reason. I'm done. I appreciate you. If you ask me not to come back, Mr. Lashley, we'll talk over some coffee. I thank you.
No, we need truth. We need truth, Sheriff. So you're always going to be invited back. So
I thank you. I
think you have a really good point. And last week I went with Senator Bergen, who is one of the chairs of the Health Committee in the legislature, and I know Representative White's here also today, who is also chair on the House side. And we talked about this very issue, especially with young people and the lack of PRTF beds that are available for young people in the state of North Carolina. But before they even get to a PRTF, the community-based services that prevent them from having to go to a PRTF is explained. And PRTF, for those that aren't familiar, psychological residential treatment facilities for young people. And we're working on that in the state of North Carolina. We just opened an adolescent beds up in Butner. A brand new facility up there that's just opened up. But we definitely need to look at more support for these young people that are crossing over multiple systems. They're in DSS custody. They've got mental health problems. They got juvenile justice involvement. And how do we serve those young people, and how do we serve them in the state of North Carolina? Because one of the things that I'm going to do is take Senator Bergen down to Rock Hill to the program that's down there, the PRTF that's in Rock Hill, and at the last population count for that facility, 95 kids in that facility were from the state of North Carolina. Of the 120 beds that they had available, 95 of them were given to North Carolina-based kids. We've got to figure out a way to serve those kids in North Carolina, and maybe it's with better if we had better community-based services for those kids. They wouldn't have to go to a PRTF to go to begin with. But thinking through how do we provide those types of services for these kids that cross over multiple different systems and need that help. So excellent point, Sheriff, and I couldn't agree with you more. I don't want to institutionalize kids if we don't have to. We should be looking at the least restrictive model that's available for those kids. But we also need to make sure that those services that are preventative of them going there are available, and that kids are able to get into those services. And I think people ask the question, why did that homicide rate go up after the pandemic? The reality is a lot of those services weren't available during the pandemic to young people. And I tell people all the time, if you want to see a social experiment that looks at whether the social safety net is important for kids, we saw it during the pandemic. That social safety net went away, and all of a sudden we saw increase in homicides, we saw increase in suicides, we saw increased mental health problems for kids, we saw increased involvement of kids in juvenile justice. We need these services, and we need them to be available, and we need qualified, certified people that are running those programs so that young people get the services that they need. And we need to make them available for kids in school, so that those kids can get those access to the one place that is the most protective factor that most kids have in their life, which is going to school. So you got me on my soapbox too. Got me going. Yvonne?
Okay, sorry, you may not invite me back anymore, even though I'm on the committee, but but listen, you just said it. It's in school, right? We've got to serve kids in school because we have to meet them where they are. That's where they are. This task force is so important, and I apologize. And, Rachel's on my team and she comes religiously. My schedule is so crazy, I can't always make it. But this task force in particular is so important because we can identify the intersections. And what Scott just shared with us, for me, in that increase in homicide, I asked the question somewhat rhetorically because I think a lot of it was not having eyes on kids. And another part is that we were also just dousing them with medication. And medication makes you extremely homicidal, typically these antipsychotics and everything else. So that's my, just, off the cuff kind of, if I had to guess, that's not a surprise because it was also not managed, nobody having eyes on these kids to see how things were going there. But to your point about the services and getting upstream, the legislature, God bless them, gave us $835 million in for behavioral health services last fiscal year. We're using those dollars. We're getting a lot of those services implemented. And the majority of those dollars are one time. So they're going to give us some capacity to boost what we need, which is why it's important that we talk about these intersections and where do we need to lean in, right? What segment, for instance, we're doing a lot of work when it comes to children boarding in emergency departments as well as DSS offices already have moved the needle 50%. Have had a 50% reduction of kids already in DSS offices just from January. So when we focus and hone in on something, we can have that collective impact that you were talking about, Rachel, right? We can see an impact, but we also have to know what those targeted strategies are, and we need you all at the table as well for that discussion. And we all have to be here together because I wanted to know, Scott, if you could stratify not on suspect for those cases, but on were any of those children DSS involved or DJJ involved? And I would like to see that. That might help us target some of our strategies. And, just curious if there's anything there to be seen. So, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to talk no more. I'm just going to listen. Well, we only
Yeah,
have
no.
12 minutes, so that's not a big deal.
It's a good question, and we do have some of that information, right? We rely on the medical examiner and then our local law enforcement agencies to help us get some of those circumstances. So we work with over 200 law enforcement agencies a year. Anytime there's a violent death that occurs in their jurisdiction, we're asking to work with them and to get some of their what are called the incident reports and other relevant information. And those incident reports are important because, when they show up on the scene and there's a body on the ground, right? They're thinking homicide first. And so they're asking questions. Now, when they're asking questions, they are asking things like, obviously, they lost a job last week, or my son was involved in a gang, or the neighbors, or whatever. So they're collecting a lot of this information, and that becomes important for our circumstances. And we have seen, and I can share it with you at another point, we have seen that among our younger population, those who are juvenile or justice involved have higher rates than other groups. And so sometimes, again, it might be that they've have some kind of immediate crisis, and maybe they don't have the tools or the skills to manage that immediate crisis, and that escalates into either a homicide or a suicide. And so so yes, we have some of that, but we are limited. I mean, as much as we would love to do kind of a deep dive and a kind of a psychological autopsy on every single person who dies in our state, we're limited by the documentation that's provided by the in many cases. If it's documented, we then document it in our system and can provide that information.
Thank you.
All right, well, excellent conversation here and discussions. I appreciate everybody for joining in the conversation. Thank you, Scott, for being here today and for presenting all that data to us today. Extremely important information. So I do want to, I got a couple of last things that we need to close up with, and the biggest one is working on our subcommittees. And so we've got different subcommittees. The first one is school climate. We've got several people that have already signed up for the school climate one, but if you're interested in that one, if you haven't signed up for a subcommittee yet, please, as a task force member, we're encouraging you to sign up for one of the subcommittees. So the first one is that school climate one. The second one is mental health and substance use. Now, Dr. Stephanie Ellis was our chair of that one. She was a member of the task force. As Karen presented earlier, she is now actually a member or actual staff member for the Center for Safer Schools. So she will no longer be on the task force. And so we need a new person that's going to chair that one. So right now, if you're interested in the mental health and substance abuse one, you can email me or Jared and let us know that you're interested in that subcommittee. I'm going to work with Zeev is here from the governor's office and work with him on getting a new person appointed for that position that Stephanie was in before. And then the final committee is Sheriff Rogers' committee. And that one is on physical design and safety of the building, including work on SROs and gang involvement. And so if you're interested in one of those three subcommittees, please let us know. We'd love to get all the task force members signed up for a particular committee before the next meeting. So if you haven't currently signed up, if you're unsure if you signed up for one, or if you're actually in that subcommittee that you signed up for, let us know and we'll reach back out to you and let you know what committee you're on. And make sure the chair knows so that they can involve you in that process of getting to the next subcommittee meetings. And I know several of these subcommittees have already started meeting, and I appreciate that. If the chairs of those subcommittees need some help, we'll certainly help them get that get whatever that they need to facilitate those subcommittees moving forward. So that's the main thing I wanted to cover to end the meeting is the subcommittee information. At our next meeting, which is on your agenda at the bottom on October 16th, please put that on your calendar now so that you can attend that next committee meeting. Our goal is to start looking at some of the recommendations that we might want to put forward as a task force in the next long session that's coming up in the next fiscal year. And so if there are additional things that you guys would like for us to make recommendations on, we made a couple of recommendations at our last meeting, for the short session. And as you know, the short session has pretty much ended already. And I know that it sounds like they may come back maybe in November and work on some budget adjustments. So we're hoping some of the recommendations that we made as far as budget recommendations will be taken up in that November session. I know they were included, some of those were included in the House budget, but not in the Senate budget. And so we're hopeful that maybe in that November session that there might be some work that is done on the budget. But the big issue would be looking at the upcoming session, the long session. So if there are things based off of the presentations that you saw today that you would like to have the task force look at as a recommendation in the coming year as things that we can do, we'd love to start working on those and make those recommendations. And I see Representative White just came off got on the camera, so I don't know if you got a comment to add to that, Representative White.
I do have a comment. I just wanted to thank you all so much for what you're doing. I started this in this involvement a long time before I went to the General Assembly, when this anonymous app was we first found out about that, and Johnston County was the trial county, and I was on the school board at that time and headed that up and was the only school board member in the state on the task force, the Safer Schools Task Force. And unfortunately, the last year and a half have been extremely busy for this particular legislator with new gavels in my hand, etc. So it's been hard to connect with you all, but I keep up with what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing. I was glad to be a sponsor of the bills that you're talking about and things that we got for you in 23. And it is a tough time for all of us because, like you said, Billy, we don't know if we're going to come back in September, October, November, and some of us, hope to be back after November for a couple more years. So, if I'm honored to be back in after November, I do want to try harder to be at more of the meetings because you all are doing phenomenal work. I appreciate every one of you and all the effort that you're putting forth to keep our children safe. And I really appreciate what you said, what you all said about the mental health. And I've asked Representative Pierce has asked me to join him to start a mental health, behavioral health House Select Committee. And so we're going to be working on that. So we'll definitely need your input and your involvement. So we will just let me know directly, 919-889-1239. I can answer anytime, not necessarily immediately, but I will answer. And you won't have my office, numbers and all that. So just know that my office is there for you, whatever we can do to help you, and appreciate your leadership, Billy. And I shouldn't be calling you Billy in this meeting, but anyway, we go back a long way. So, but anyway, thank you so much. Hope y'all have a wonderful rest of the week and be safe.
Thank you, Representative White. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I see India Williams. Did you have a quick question or comment?
Yes, very quick. Thank you, everyone. The question that I had, it stems from, it's an administrative question, basically wanting to know if there is a way to make a position on the task force available for clergy. And I'll give you the rationale behind that. I a few months ago, met with some clergy from the Raleigh Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance, also called REMA. And that was following the violence that occurred at Southeast Raleigh High School. They were very instrumental in coming together and kind of bringing the community together to sort of heal from that. But what also stemmed from that was a larger conversation on how members of clergy could be a little more engaged to help kind of be a part of some of these planning, the planning and decisions for, and because they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in the community, they're very connected to families. It just made sense. So I said, well, I sit on the task force for Safer Schools, and I could see about possibly getting a position designated for clergy, and they could sort of rotate, different members of the REMA Alliance in that particular position, the same way we do with the other designated positions. And I know there are a couple of at-large positions, but I think having a designated faith-based or clergy role, I think says a lot for a community, especially knowing that we live in a state that faith-based organizations really do play a large role in community. So I just wanted to bring that to you to see if there's a possibility going forward to create a designation for clergy.
That's a great question and great point. I think we could, the legislation that creates the Safer School Task Force, we could always go back and see if we could get a tweak and make a tweak to that to add a position that's specifically for clergy. I see Representative White giving us the thumbs up on that. So if we can work on a recommendation to do some language on that moving forward, if those members are interested in being involved in one of the subcommittees in the meantime, we'd love to have them. You don't have to be a task force member to be in one of the subcommittees. And so if there's some work that they would like to be involved in, Ms. Williams, on that, please just go ahead and pass their names along to us and we can go ahead and get them started. And if they would like to come and present at one of the upcoming task force meetings, we can certainly work that out also until we get the legislation updated to have a clergy member on the actual task force. We can certainly, we can get that amended. I have a feeling that would be an easy thing for members to go along with.
Awesome. That sounds great. So I will make that my action item to reach back out to REMA, the leaders of REMA, and share that information as far as being able to be a part of the subcommittees, but also that we'll put the proposal up to get that designation going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And then Yvonne, did you have one other question or are you done? I can't tell if that was a hand that was raised before or that's a new hand.
It's probably stuck up there. I'm sorry. No, I don't have another question. Thank you.
It looked like it was losing circulation to the finger, so I was unsure. Well, with that being said, I appreciate everybody being here today, and I appreciate I know this is voluntary work that you're doing as part of the task force, and we just greatly appreciate all the work that you guys do at the meetings here, but also in the interim to make these meetings successful. So thank you for being active members of the Safer Schools Task Force. And please be safe over the next couple of days as the weather moves in. And we will see you in October, on October 16th at the next meeting. So thank y'all very much. Have a good day.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.